Afternoon, everyone. This is a quick video for the meme analysis question that I posed to you. I asked you to send me a couple of memes about being on lockdown or about being in social distancing, just as a bit of a laugh, but also to kind of think about how we can use language to explain things, and also look at how memes themselves are based on language principles that make them funny. So hopefully I'm not going to ruin these memes for you, but if I can teach you a little bit about them, that'll be interesting. So this is our first one, which is obviously SpongeBob. He's pretty self-explanatory. He's getting up, saying he wants to leave, and then he realizes that he can't. And obviously, we've got the expression on his face that is highlighting the joke. He's not able to. So let's unpack this meme a little bit and think about what makes it so effective. I think it is a good meme for a number of reasons, but it also actually raises a couple of questions about why we find it funny. So take this little lecture with a pinch of salt. Again, it's just my opinion, but the linguistic things are going to come up in terms of what we already know about language. Okay. So, firstly, the way that SpongeBob is talking, now I know it's a little speech bubble, but it's kind of crudely put onto him as a character. We know it's meant to be him thinking or him talking. We've got the use of AAVE. Now, we know this is African American Vernacular English, and we know this is a dialect in itself that is used in America. It's an African American dialect used all across America, but because we're on the internet and we've got lots of people communicating through different channels and different memes and different social media sites, it proved to be quite a particularly popular dialect or indeed sociolect that people use for memes. So, in terms of the meme itself, both sentences use AAVE. So, we'll talk a little bit about what features are being employed, because my argument is that actually we know SpongeBob doesn't talk like that. He doesn't speak rap or gangster, but we know he's being used as a sort of character to show why this is funny. Okay, so my argument is that the meme relies on knowledge of the grammar and the phonology of AAVE, because you have to be able to read it in your head in that sort of style in order to create a persona or an identity for the reader or whoever actually shares the meme. So this is only funny if you can actually do the voice in your head. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do it myself, but if you want to have a go, see how SpongeBob talks, both grammatically and phonologically. So have a look at some of the phonemes that are being used. We'll see that actually it's been used on purpose. It's been chosen strategically to make it seem very weird for SpongeBob to talk like this. Okay. First thing we've got is the idea of what's called an I dialect, which is a brand new term, but literally all it means is that written mode language, so language in the written mode, represents dialect. Now, you'll see this quite a lot in dialect writing and fiction. If anyone's read Train Spotting, you'll see examples of I dialect. Basically, it's a spelling principles applied to make it look like you have got an accent and somebody really talking in that way. So our first example is "ait," you might pronounce it like that, which in standard English would be all right. And we know that in AAVE it's pronounced as "ait." So I've kind of put the IPA for that as either "ait" or even with a glottal. So you might actually pronounce this with a glottal stop. And obviously we've got phonemes that have been taken off. So all right, you've got the L and the R taken off, and it basically merge them together. So some linguists might call that a blend. You might view it as elision. Essentially, you've got parts of phonemes that have been missed off to make it sound like it's AAVE. Key thing for us is if you have a look at it, it's interesting because it's the first thing that's said, it's the beginning of the utterance, and he's not really saying it to anybody, but it's the kind of thing you say when you are talking to somebody. All right, I know, let's go. Almost like a back channel or a little bit of a discourse marker. In this case, I'd probably class it down as an interjection. So interjections are words that don't really have a grammatical function. They're more about announcing something to the listener. So saying yes, for example, doesn't have a grammatical function. It's purely to interject and to say an opinion. So in this example, "ait" is him saying, "I'm ready," or "I'm going to do something." Next one we've got "I'm a." Now, this obviously jumps out as AAVE. Most people will recognize that as AAVE, and a very contracted form of "I'm going to." "I'm going to" in itself is a verb phrase because it's got the head verb is going to be head out. So I'm going to head out. I'm a, or Amma, however you want to pronounce it, specifically is the elision of that participle, going. So going to is elided to just be Amma. So I am to ma. And again, very obviously, it's a feature of AAVE. Most people would notice that. Again, it sounds very realistic, and it's an example of I dialect. Right, next one, head out. I love this. Don't know whether I'd use it all the time, but go out, head out, pop out. We often use these phrasal verbs to say things that have a very particular meaning. Head out, obviously, for SpongeBob means he wants to leave his house and he wants to go somewhere. Head out to the shops. It's got quite a positive connotation, which is obviously what makes it funny later on. Key thing here is it's a phrasal verb. Now, phrasal verbs are verbs that come in a phrase, which sounds really obvious, but compare the difference between head something and head out. So to head something, you might head a ball, you might head a meeting, which is very different to head out. Similarly, other phrasal verbs, watch out is very different to head out. Again, the phrase itself has a particular meaning. And in this case, actually, it's an idiom because to head out of something, you don't just use your head, and you leave with your whole body. So again, it is an idiom that's being used. And again, altogether, all of those from the first panel of this comic, we view it as a little bit like a comic book. All of those elements go together to make it very much the dialect is represented AAVE or features of AAVE. They're together. Right, second one we're going to talk about, and this applies to most memes and not just this SpongeBob meme, so we'll talk about this a little bit, is cohesion. Now, cohesion is something we have talked about in class, but it's quite a nebulous term and it's quite complex, but once you've got your head around it, it's dead easy. If we think that a text is a collection of letters made into words, made into sentences, made into a story, then we know that a story has to make sense. It has to be cohesive. So when I say cohesion, I want you to think about the text having a sort of texture or having a glue that keeps it all together. So a really obvious example is I love my cat, she eats too much. The first sentence, I love my cat, the object of that sentence is the cat. The second sentence, she eats too much. She is the pronoun that obviously refers back to the cat. Now, if you got rid of the cat part, if you just said she eats too much, it wouldn't have that cohesion, it wouldn't make sense. And this is what we call anaphora or anaphors. Now, if you've done poetry before, you'll know that anaphors often appear at the beginning of a line, and they're actually a repetition. In linguistics, generally, anaphora or anaphors are anaphoric reference. So I'll put that. Anaphoric references. Spell it right as well. Anaphoric references are anything that hold the text together as a sort of textual glue. So in our example here, we've got I, which is obviously the first person pronoun, plus the picture of SpongeBob. So when we read that, we understand that I, as in I'm a, and I can't, refer to SpongeBob talking in first person, which sounds really obvious, but this is cohesion. It glues the whole meme together. So in the first panel, I'm a head out, is SpongeBob saying it. In the second panel, I can't. So we've got the references to first person singular pronoun there as the subject. And that's what cohesion means. Next bit of cohesion we've got is the word can't. Now, this one obviously refers back to the previous sentence. I'm a head out. Oh, yeah, I can't. I can't is the glue that holds together the first utterance. So, I'm a head out. Oh, yeah, I can't. If you didn't have head out, oh, yeah, I can't, like if you just had that meme just as one panel, it wouldn't have the cohesion. It wouldn't have that textual glue that holds it all together. So, oh yeah, I can't relies on what SpongeBob wants to do. So that phrasal verb, head out, is obviously being negated here by that modal verb, can't. And that's why it's funny, because it's referring back to something that he can't do. So it's a negative modal verb. It's obviously the opposite of can. I can't do it. It's quite straightforward, casual register, obviously linking back to the idea it's very casual conversational language. It's in AAVE. And it has, in this case, an anaphoric reference to what SpongeBob wants to do. So it makes sense that he says that because it's cohesive with what was previously said. So A couple of questions regarding this in terms of why this meme is successful. Obviously, it's only a small number of words, but it's still quite funny and it does work. Firstly, who is SpongeBob talking to? There's nobody else in the picture. So he's talking to himself. Okay. This raises a couple of questions of, is this SpongeBob's real voice? Is he talking is it his internal monologue that's coming out? And then that's quite funny for us because we know SpongeBob doesn't talk like that. He doesn't have an African American vernacular in his language. So is this like his real voice? So I'm doing air quotes here if you can't see me. Or is this something that's purposefully to make him sound really, really rap and hip hop? Or is it something like that? Also, the fact that he says "Aight, I'm a head out," and he's not talking to anybody, that in itself is funny because why would you say "Hey everyone" when or "All right" when you're not talking to anybody? And then, secondly, why do we find this funny? Why is African American vernacular English funny? Is it something to do with the dialect itself? Are we looking down on it? Or is it just because it's so different to how SpongeBob talks? So again, I don't have a definite answer to this. Obviously, humour is in the eye of the beholder or the ear of the beholder. From my point of view, I think it's probably because it's incongruous. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't flow well with the idea of SpongeBob talking like that. But you could also view it from the point of view of that the accent and the dialect of AAVE is stigmatized. Okay, the second meme we've got is a Twitter post, and it's in the style of a conversation, a bit of dialogue. We've got one character saying, "What you in for, pal?" He replies, and then the second response from that is, "Went for 2 runs last Wednesday." So obviously the joke here is that two people have been incarcerated. They're in prison for various reasons. One is for murder, and one is for flouting social distancing rules for being outside and going for 2 runs, which obviously is quite a running meme joke on British Twitter right now, which is funny. So we'll have a look at what makes this funny, what makes it work in terms of linguistics, because we've got to unpick, even though it's really simple, there's quite a lot going on here in terms of how the author is expressing this idea of the nonsense situation. Obviously, it's not real, it's absurd. So it's an example of absurdism. So we need to explain it in terms of language. Okay, so before we do that, first thing we need to do is go back to our theories of spoken language and think about how spoken language often contains what's called deixis. Now, deixis is 3 parts to it. We've got a speaker who's in the middle. So normally the speaker would speak about themselves with a first person singular pronoun I, and they could speak in second person to a different person with the second person or the third person pronoun. So it's a weird abstract concept to get your head around, but once you do it, it's dead easy. I know I say that about everything, but it really is. So basically, there's 3 types of deixis. We've got personal deixis, which is about people. We've got time deixis, which is about when. And then we've got space deixis. So we've got spatial, temporal, or time, and personal. Just like you've got 3 dimensions, for language, you've got time, space, and people. And that's in every language. Different languages do it differently. You might think about how different languages refer to space and time and how they refer to the past, and how some languages have metaphors for not I'm looking back at the past, but I'm carrying my past with me. So again, different ways of doing it. Deixis is important because essentially it tells us that there's always lots of decisions being made by a speaker when they're talking to somebody, to make sure they are placed in a center, meaning, i.e., the listener understands who they're talking about, what they're talking about, what they have to do, but also when and where. So actually, it's quite straightforward. So some things you might temporal deixis. We've got adverbs for time, and then spatial ones often are prepositions or pronouns, and then personal pronouns for personal deixis. Okay, so what does that mean? Just like with the SpongeBob meme, we've got a lot of cohesive elements going on in this meme. We've got a lot of cohesion, and again, cohesion is the textual glue that holds a text together. One example would be, "What you in for, pal?" Obviously, the adjacency pair that follows after that question. So a question, then we get an answer. So we've got not a back channel, but an adjacency pair here. "What you in for, pal?" Murder, you. We've got 2 personal pronouns, you and you, obviously showing that cohesion-wise, they are talking to each other. So this you is firstly diactic because we know they're talking about somebody. They're talking in second person to the other inmate. It's being repeated. Second person pronoun. It simulates a conversation. It almost looks like they're having a real chat. Now we know this is not real. It's a meme. I know it looks like they're having a conversation. It does have an adjacency pair, but actually it is purely diactic and it's simulated. Another thing it's anaphoric. Anaphor means it refers to things that are given in the text that are referred back to. So if you say, what you in for, pal, that assumes there is another person there. Likewise, murder, you, that is based on the anaphor, what the first person said. So the first person speaks to the second person. They have to both use second person pronouns to talk to each other. Yeah, and that's where personal deaxis comes in. Third line, we've got no subject being used. So in standard English, normally you'd have every sentence of a subject, and in formal registers, you'd say, I went for a run. Go away. I went for a run. I went for 2 runs last Wednesday. In this example, we've got that example of casual register. The subject has been dropped. I went for 2 runs last Wednesday. So by focusing on the verb first, this is still a declarative sentence. It is purposefully trying to say they're having a nice conversation where it's casual. So on that formality scale, it's very casual. And obviously, he's replying back to the question. So one adjacency pair there, second adjacency pair there. And again, because this is based on given information, i.e., he's been asked the question, this guy's telling this guy why he's in prison. It's cohesion because it glues the text together. It all flows together. If you just had that sentence, went for 2 runs last Wednesday, although funny, it's not as funny as the rest of it all put together because it doesn't have that textual cohesion. Yeah. Another example of cohesion and temporal deaxis or time deaxis is the fact that he says last Wednesday. So obviously he's referring back to a very specific point in time. So the speaker is referring to a particular point in the past. Went for 2 runs last Wednesday. So if we consider when the rules came in, we can assume this is in the future and they're talking about the past. So it's kind of like a little sci-fi script talking about, what crime have you committed in the future? What did I do? I did 2 runs last Wednesday. It wasn't approved of. And we've also got, apart from all the anaphors, we've got lots of pragmatic things we could comment on. So for a fact, if they're in prison or they've been incarcerated in some way, what are you in for? Again, we know that's an idiom that means you're inside, you've been captured, you've been put in prison. We've got the use of symphatic language. So pal, so a word like a title that's very friendly, grammatically doesn't need to be there, but it's again pragmatics because it shows they've got solidarity between each other. It's a nice thing to say. It's a friendly thing to say. It's like a word like mate or friend. Again, this falls into pragmatics because it's the social rules that underpin language. So if you're being friendly with somebody, you might call them pal. Now, you could look at that from terms of gender and say, is pal actually meant to be a very friendly thing? Some men might say pal to be quite abrasive, but I think in this example, it shows solidarity because they're both in prison together. What are you in for? Murder you. So again, this idea they're both serious criminals because obviously murder is a serious crime. And then lastly, the humour of it is the fact that you have got murder being part of one adjacency pair being juxtaposed with the crime of the second person, 2 runs. So again, a really simple little noun phrase being juxtaposed with the humour of, not the humour of murder, but the humour is created through the juxtaposition of it being an anticlimax. Because obviously an anticlimax is you're let down, you're, as a reader, you find something that's disappointing. But in this case, it's funny purely because of the anticlimax. So obviously knowing that you can't leave your house more than once unless it's for essential reasons, to go for 2 runs on one day will be seen as a crime. And that's why cohesively, again, relies on given information. So just like the SpongeBob meme that relies on the idea that SpongeBob doesn't talk like that, and SpongeBob feels sad and he wants to leave his pineapple, again, it's given information. Okay, so that's just 2 memes from the past week that have been quite popular. And again, thank you for everyone who sent them. I'm going to stop here because I've been talking for quite a while. But in terms of everything we spotted, just pause the video now. for SpongeBob. Make a few notes there, and then the same for this one. Okay, so as a reminder, Diaxis is primarily related to spoken language, and obviously these are memes that are simulating spoken language. They're meant to look like they are. Okay, right, have a good day, everyone. Hope you're keeping well. Obviously, if you're feeling down, have a look at some memes, but also talk to your family, talk to your friends. Don't forget to go on some video chats and chat to people. It's one of the best ways to feel a bit more social if you can't meet people. Okay, right, see you later.